Të nderuar teleshikues, mirëmbrëma. Sonde ekskluzivisht për TV Klan ne kemi të ftuar zotin Janush Bugajski, i cili është drejtori i Qendrës së Studimeve Strategjike për Evropën Lindore dhe Juglindore me qendër në Uashington. Zoti Bugajski njihet për studimet e tij serioze në vendet e Evropës Lindore dhe Qendrore dhe sidomos për studimin e tranzicionit të demokracive të tyre. Ai ka qenë disa herë prezent në Shqipëri, duke filluar që nga viti 91-92 dhe ka bërë gjithashtu studime lidhur me demokracinë shqiptare. Sonte ne do të diskutojmë me zotin Bugajski problemin numër 1 në rajon, sigurisht për problemin e Kosovës. Zoti Bugajski, welcome in our studio.
Thank you very much.
Pyetja e parë që do t'ju drejtoja ishte, a mendoni se tani që Kosova është e lirë pa trupa serbe, do të duhet një kohë e shkurtër për të kaluar tranzicionin dhe rekonstruksionin e saj?
Well, this is a historic moment, I think, for the people of Kosovo and also for all Albanians throughout the Balkans. I think the reconstruction of Kosovo is going to take several years. So much damage has been done by Milosevic's forces that we're basically starting from scratch, at least economically. But there's plenty of work for all the international organizations, for NATO to provide security for the people, for the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, to provide institution building, democracy building, and of course for the European Union in terms of economic reconstruction, which is going to be a major effort, I think, over the next few years. So there's plenty of work, but I would be patient. This is going to take time, this is going to take a lot of hard work.
Njëkohësisht në fushën politike në Kosovë, përveç problemeve që ka për ndërtimin ekonomik, pra ekzistojnë realisht dy qeveri, që është qeveria Thaçi, qeveria Bukoshi dhe një qeveri ndërkombëtare e cila realisht do të udhëheqë Kosovën për një farë periudhe tranzicioni. A mendoni se ka një kolaps në këtë drejtim? Si mund të zgjidhet kjo?
No, I don't think there's a collapse. I think there's a good deal of political paralysis at the moment. I think the most important government is going to be the one that emerges from the elections inside Kosovo. The most important, I think, thing in the interim is for the two Kosovo shadow governments, if you like, or semi-governments, to come together to form some sort of united provisional council in which NATO, in which the UN will have a proper interlocutor to implement the reconstruction program, to build the institutions. This has to happen quickly. The institution building will take longer, but the Albanians coming together has to be done quickly. Otherwise, what I fear is that the more conflicts you have between the Albanians, the more it would justify the international community saying the Albanians simply aren't fit for self-government. The Kosovar people aren't fit for self-government. I think it's time for the Kosovars to show that they can govern themselves in one institution.
Në vizitën që ka bërë zoti Bob Dole, i ka bërë thirrje Rrugovës se të kthehet sa më shpejt dhe të japi kontributin e tij në Kosovë. Cili, sipas mendimit tuaj, cili do të jetë roli i Rrugovës tani dhe a ka mbështetjen që ka pasur përpara sa të fillonte lufta?
During his visit, Mr. Dole in Kosovo has invited Rugova to turn back in Kosovo. What will be the role of Rugova in the new era for Kosovo?
I personally think President Rugova has played quite a constructive role over the past 10 years. Indeed, it can be argued that because of his policy, major violence was avoided. I think the problem with his policy was that he lost touch with developments. In other words, he lost touch with the frustrations amongst the Kosovar population, the repression, increasing repression of the Serbs. In other circumstances, let's put it this way, his Gandhian approach would have worked, but not in these circumstances. However, I still think he has some role to play, but I think it's really for the Kosovars to decide. I think he needs to come back. I think there needs to be inclusion of Mr. Rugova and his team, the LDK, within the institution, the interim institution that emerges. And then during elections, the Albanian population, the Kosovar population will decide who is the more popular leader. It's not up to me, it's not up to anybody in the international community to say.
Në diplomacinë ndërkombëtare me zor artikulohet problemi I pavarësisë Kosovës. Ndërkohë shumë diplomat, por dhe analistë pavarur, sikurse jeni dhe ju, mendojnë se nuk është reale që Kosova të ngelet akoma nën Serbi. A mendoni ju se do t'ishte më realiste dhe një zgjidhje më afatgjatë problemi i Kosovës duke dalë më vete, pra duke u shkëputur nga ish Federata Jugoslave?
The international diplomacy thinks hardly about the independence of Kosovo. Meanwhile, some analysts tell that it's easy to have an independent Kosovo either than an autonomous Kosovo inside Serbia, inside Yugoslavia.
Yes, I think the ultimate solution has to be an independent Kosovo. There is no way, I don't think that the Albanian population would ever want to live with the regime in Belgrade, or indeed anything that replaces the Milosevic regime. I think Yugoslavia is a failed state. The violence happened because Milosevic and his people wanted to keep the remnants of Yugoslavia together. I think the natural next step, it may take time, but I think it's an inevitable step, is for both Kosovo, Montenegro, and Serbia to become 3 independent states. And then you can begin to build some kind of a normal relationship, as Albania has with other countries, as Bosnia has with other countries. But I think it's essential that in order for that to happen, that the Albanians are able to show within Kosovo, and I can't stress this enough, they have to show they are fit for self-government and fit for their own state. And this can happen, I think, over the next 2 or 3 years under this international umbrella.
Ndërkohë që, siç thoni dhe ju, do të ketë një shpërbërje të ish Jugosllavisë në shtetet veçanta. Cili mendoni ju se do të jetë roli shqiptar në kuadrin ballkanik? Pra, a mos ka ardhur koha për një bashkim të shqiptarëve të Malit të Zi, të Kosovës, të Shqipërisë dhe të Maqedonisë?
Is it time to have united the Albanians in Albania, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Kosovo now at this moment?
Well, I think the Albanians in a way will be united once the Southeast European region moves towards Europe, moves towards NATO. I think rather than thinking of some large Albanian state, the important thing is to get the states that exist, including Kosovo, I include Kosovo as a state, as a functioning country, as a functioning, prosperous, developing states. And this is where I think the Stability Pact, I think international involvement under the NATO umbrella could help push that process along. In fact, here in Tirana, we had a very important conference this weekend organized by the Albanian Institute of International Studies on these very issues. What role can Albania play? What role would there be in the future for Kosovo? I think in terms of the stability in the region, it's absolutely essential to start some major reconstruction program, but there have to be the institutions in place that can handle reconstruction. And unfortunately, several countries in the region have still to develop those institutions.
A mendoni ju se faktori shqiptar është stabilizues apo destabilizues për Maqedoninë, ndërkohë që këtë shtet perëndimi, sidomos Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, janë shumë të interesuara për ta ruajtur si shtet?
The Albanian factor is a stabilized factor for Macedonia at this moment when we are talking about problems with authorities there.
Yes, I think it's absolutely critical to have an integrated, sovereign, independent Macedonia. I think Macedonia has made some steps in recent months to have a genuine multi-ethnic government. I still think a lot needs to be done to give the Albanians the rights they deserve as citizens of this state, as co-partners, if you like, in this state. However, I think if we start to talk about the disintegration of Macedonia or Montenegro, then we are faced with wider problems. Macedonia is not a failed state, just like Albania is not a failed state or Montenegro is not a failed state. As I said before, Yugoslavia is. If indeed there are pressures to, let's say, separate the Albanian regions from Macedonia, then I think we could have a major Balkan war on our hands. And this is something that the international community wants to avoid. And ultimately, if this reconstruction plan works, there won't be a need for changing any more borders, because you will have increasing trade, increasing cooperation, institutional integration into Europe, into NATO. Hence, I don't think the idea of some kind of a split of Macedonia is in anybody's interest, including the interest of Albanians.
Sipas mendimit tuaj, përse për herë të parë në histori ndoshta perëndimi ishte me shqiptarët? Sepse perëndimi kishte interesa strategjike në Ballkan, apo sepse shqiptarët treguan se tashmë janë të përgatitur për të bashkuar me perëndimin, me parimet e tij?
For the first time in the history, the West was at the same side of the Albanians. This was because the West has a strategic interest in Albania and in Albanian people.
Yes, I think the consensus is that without the resolution of the Albanian question, let's put it that way, in the Balkans, in the South Balkans, there can be no peace in the region. Hence, I think America in particular, but also its allies, realized that the continuation of the situation in Kosovo was simply unfeasible, that this couldn't go on for much longer, that this was so explosive that it could have affected a wider region, not just the Balkans. Hence, I think the pressure began on Belgrade to come to some resolution, and when it came clear that Milosevic wasn't interested in a peaceful resolution, that's when NATO used force. NATO used force, I think, to prevent a wider conflagration. But it's absolutely essential, I think, that the Albanian development of the Albanian people is supported, is assured by Europe, by NATO, by the international community. Particularly, I would say, Albania itself. A lot of work still needs to be done in this country to assure full development, to assure future integration. I think Albania can serve as a good example in the region if it gets its own house in order.
Mbas gjithë kësaj që ndodhi, si mendoni ju, a do të jetë primar roli amerikano-anglez apo roli tradicional i Evropës Perëndimore, duke pasur parasysh shtetet e tjera të Bashkimit Evropian?
After all what happens, can we speak now for an Anglo-American domination in the Balkans, or we can talk just about the traditional domination of Europe?
I think domination may be the wrong word. If anything, I would say it's really an expansion of the Euro-Atlantic community. If there were problems like this in Western Europe, hopefully NATO would do the same thing. Hence, I think both Albania, Kosovo, Macedonia, other countries have been brought increasingly under the NATO umbrella, in which, of course, America plays the most important role, because it's the strongest country militarily, economically. It has the least, let's say, interest, historical interest in the region in terms of any kind of ulterior motives, any kind of great power interests. And of course, the other question is the role of Russia. And I think this is why it's essential for NATO to be involved in Southeast Europe and not leave this area to potential re-imperial interest, re-imperialization by Russia, as well as the interests of international mafia criminal syndicates, which are very rampant already in the region. Hence, I think rather than talking about domination, I would rather talk about integration. It's going to take time, but I think these are the first steps.
A mendoni se ka të ardhme Miloševiqi në radhë të parë dhe në radhë të dytë? Është Serbia që ka një Miloševiq apo të gjithë serbët janë Miloševiq?
At this moment, do you think that Milosevic has a future? And the second is Serbia that has a Milosevic, or is all the Yugoslav people are Milosevic?
Well, I would like to see Milosevic's future behind prison bars in The Hague. Milosevic will not survive indefinitely. Sooner or later, he has to go. And I think it may happen sooner than we think. Serbia faces so many internal problems in terms of economic collapse, in terms of potential social unrest, the new wave of refugees from all over Yugoslavia, that Milosevic led the Serbs into war and then abandoned them. They're coming back to Yugoslavia. In terms of Montenegro wanting to break away, in terms of unrest within the military. There are so many problems, international isolation that he faces. Sooner or later, I think there will be a major implosion in Serbia and Milosevic will disappear. The question is what replaces him. I don't see any credible democratic alternative on the immediate horizon. But I think with the continuation of the Serbian national myth, vis-à-vis Kosovo, vis-à-vis Montenegro, I don't think anything will be resolved in Serbia. Serbia has to get away from its let's say its myths, its history, its uses and abuses of nationalism. It has to focus on internal reform. This will take time. To answer the other question, I don't think Serbia is made up just of Milosevic's, but there are many Milosevic's in Serbia, unfortunately. Many intellectuals, many political leaders acted completely irresponsibly for the past 10 years in supporting this so-called Greater Serbia project. And now they're faced with the consequences, which is a potential internal collapse and civil war.
Të kthehemi pak te problemi I Shqipërisë. Si mendoni ju cila është ardhmja e saj? Pra, mbas gjithë kësaj që ka ndodhur, a kanë të drejtë shqiptarët që të jenë entuziastë për shekullin që I pret?
Coming back to Albania, can Albanians be enthusiastic for the next century?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't be pessimistic, I would be optimistic, but with a dose of realism. I think for Albania to benefit, for example, from the reconstruction that's been pledged by the international community, it has to do certain things domestically. No investor, no government is going to come here and invest, no company will invest, unless the Albanians are able to build a secure, stable institutions in which investment can have a return, in which it could develop. Hence, I think Albania has a future, but it depends on the Albanian people. It depends how committed they are, not just to the end of communism, but to the beginning of a market economy and the rule of law.
Ajo duket pak I çuditshëm vendimi që porti I Selanikut marrë rol prioritar në ndihmat që do vinë nga Bashkimi Evropian për shqiptarët dhe bankat e Maqedonisë të marrin rol prioritar për sa I përket parave që do të qarkullojnë për këtë problem.
All the money came for the integration, for the development programs.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about intergovernmental money that's going to be given simply to governments to spend the way they want to. I think the most important is the businesses, and I do a lot with American business and European business, the businesses that can come into this country because this is a good place to invest, because this is a secure climate, a stable political system, and a commitment to allow foreign investment. Direct investment, not through other countries, not through other channels, but directly within Albania. But for that to happen, I think Albania, the government, has to make a commitment to the international community. Reconstruction starts at home rather than in Europe.
Ju keni qenë që nga viti 91 dhe më pastaj vazhdimisht në Shqipëri her pas here. A mendoni se klasa politike shqiptare është e gatshme për ta përballuar këtë situatë të re apo duhet një klasë tjetër politike?
I think it's slow to emerge, and I think probably the best example is Skanderbeg Square, where Hoxha's statue used to stand. It no longer stands, but nothing stands in its place. I think that the institutions of democracy, of a functioning, stable democracy, have still to be built. I think the problem with Albania is it's veered from the most terrible dictatorship in Europe to a state which is very weak, which isn't able to control public order, which unfortunately falls prey to criminality or allows criminality to thrive, international crime, organized crime. Hence, I think the institutions have to be built, and I have faith in the Albanian people that they can do it. The question is to choose the right politicians, to choose the right institutions. Quite possibly, I'm not here to say what the Albanians should do, but quite possibly this may need either new elections or some kind of interim, let's say, government of national reconstruction that can be committed to bringing in the foreign investment, to building up, developing this economy.
Dhe në fund të kësaj bisede, duke u falenderuar për prezencën tuaj në studiot e televizionit ton, a keni një gjë speciale për t'i thënë shikuesve të TV Klanit?
At the end of this talk, do you have something special to say to the Klan television viewers?
Well, just really to the Albanian people, I think this is one of the most important moments in Albanian history. The liberation of Kosovo has finally come about, but I think the hard work begins now. We can continue to celebrate, but really the hard work of reconstruction, building institutions, ensuring public order, and integrating with the international community. This is a big chance for the Albanians to become true Europeans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.